It's 1935, and on the rolling hills of the English countryside, there is a Victorian mansion where the wealthy Tallis family resides. Briony Tallis, the talented youngest daughter of the family, is in her bedroom finishing writing her play about the challenges of a girl called Arabella. She's really excited about it. It's the first she has written at the young age of 13. And she's looking forward to showing everyone in her family. Her mother is really proud of her, and Briony plans to act in the play for her older brother, Leon, who is coming home after some time away. Briony is an obstinate, imaginative girl. She spends her time writing or imagining fantastic worlds and characters. Being the youngest, she has a good relationship with her siblings, though because of the age difference, they aren't too close, which also makes Briony a lonely girl sometimes. There's someone, though, who has taken time to get to know her and who she admires a lot. That person is Robbie, a handsome man who grew up with the Tallis children, so he has known Briony forever. His mother has been a servant in their household for years, and he even got his education at Cambridge paid by the rich family. Because he gives her a sliver of attention, Briony develops a crush on him. But of course Robbie doesn't see her like that. In fact, his mind is elsewhere, more specifically in Briony's older sister, Cecilia, unbeknown to Briony. The girl invites Robbie to watch her play, but he says he can't, though he doesn't give her a reason. It's obvious, though, that the family keeps the servants separate from their social life, as is confirmed later by Cecilia. It seems like Robbie and Cecilia once were good friends, but Briony has noticed that they don't talk as often anymore. When she questions Cecilia for the reason, her sister only says that they now have different social circles. Briony doesn't really understand the way her society works yet, and Robbie is her friend. What she doesn't realize is that Cecilia and Robbie are far from friends, and that leads to all the issues in the story, because Briony sees something she doesn't understand. That same day, when she's in her bedroom, she sees something that confuses and shocks her. Her sister Cecilia and Robbie are in front of a fountain, arguing about something, but they are too far for Briony to hear. There are a bunch of flowers around Cecilia, and she's barefoot. Robbie signals for her to stop, which angers Cecilia, and instead of doing as he asks, she starts stripping, being left only in her underclothes. Seeing her sister strip in front of a man shocks Briony so much that she averts her eyes. Her curiosity about what's happening takes the better of her and she looks again. This time, her sister leaves the fountain dripping wet, with no shame about standing in front of Robbie with her transparent underclothes. Her behavior is not proper, and though Briony is confused by what she saw, something about it makes her wonder about her sister and Robbie. What Briony doesn't know is that Cecilia also likes Robbie, and he reciprocates her feelings. Before the accident at the fountain, she tries to make him jealous by saying that her brother is bringing a millionaire friend with him, but Robbie doesn't seem to fall for her prodding. Cecilia is a rather proud young woman, as we see when the vase she's holding breaks, and instead of accepting Robbie's help so she doesn't hurt herself with the broken shards, she takes off her clothes and goes into the fountain to get the shards. Robbie finds her temper rather funny, until she comes out all wet and he can't stop staring at her. Cecilia is pissed at his behavior and leaves him in a rush, which bothers Robbie, because the last thing he wants is to make her go away or see him as an idiot. Moving on, Leon arrives with his friend, the millionaire he's trying to matchmake with Cecilia, called Paul. She's happy to see her brother, and they spend some time together at the lake. Leon's friend can't stop talking about politics, but when Cecilia tries to participate in the conversation, he changes the subject to talk about drinks. Leon notices that Cecilia doesn't seem interested in his friend at all, and it seems he knows about her crush on Robbie, especially when he tells her he invited him for dinner that day. Cecilia is upset, mainly because she got into an argument with Robbie and probably didn't want to see him. Her brother doesn't care that she's annoyed, as he tells Paul who Robbie is and that he and Cecilia were in college at the same time. But she completely ignored his existence, because it would tarnish her reputation to hang out with the son of a servant. When Cecilia asks Leon to tell Robbie not to come to dinner, her brother wonders if something happened, but Cecilia ignores the question. Later that day, Paul sees Lola, Briony and Cecilia's cousin, fighting with her two younger brothers and decides to intervene. Lola is a pretty girl, though barely older than Briony, and she catches the millionaire's attention. Lola is in a bad situation at the moment. Her parents are divorcing, which is shameful, and her brothers blame her for their stay at the Tallis mansion. She's vulnerable, and Paul immediately notices. Meanwhile, Robbie tries to write a letter of apology to Cecilia, but nothing he writes seems right. In the end, instead of apologizing, he writes an explicit letter about his thoughts. He finds it funny, but obviously he isn't going to give it to her. It would be improper. He writes a different letter confessing that his actions in the fountain were because he can't act right in her presence, and that's the letter he's supposed to give Cecilia. After he finishes writing it, he gets ready for dinner, since he was invited by Leon to participate. He looks dashing, and he's looking forward to seeing Cecilia again, especially to give her his letter. On his way to the mansion, he sees Briony, who had spent the day angry about what she saw, and decides to ask her to deliver his letter to Cecilia, not expecting that she would be curious and read it. When she runs away, Robbie has a moment where he realizes that he gave her the wrong letter. Instead of picking up the apology, he picked up the explicit one. Desperate, he tries to call Briani back, but it's already too late. As soon as Briani arrives home, she opens the letter and once again is shocked with the contents. She runs to the tea room and delivers the open letter to Cecilia, who cannot believe what she's reading. Then she realizes that her little sister probably read it, but Briani refuses to answer when she asks. Cecilia is instantly worried about the repercussions if Briani decides to tattle on Robbie. The girl pretends nothing is wrong for her siblings, though deep down she's mad. She starts thinking that Robbie is addicted to intimacy, and she's worried about what he can do to her sister. When she tells Lola, her cousin agrees with her, which makes Briani sure that Robbie's bad. As she's going to dinner, she sees her sister's pin on the ground and thinks that the worst has happened. She starts looking for her sister, and when she enters a library, she sees Cecilia and Robbie in a compromising position. Not understanding what she's actually seeing, she thinks Robbie did something bad to her sister, which frightens Briani to her core. The girl has no idea that what actually happened is that Cecilia confronted Robbie about the letter, and in their conversation, she confesses her feelings for him. They start kissing and things escalate. In the middle of it, Briani enters. Instead of explaining to her what is going on, they abruptly leave the confused girl alone in the room. Things are tense during dinner between Cecilia, Robbie, and Briani. They can barely stand her accusing eyes. What is worse, something happens to Briani's cousins who were staying with the family and everyone has to go look for them in the middle of dinner. Briani goes by herself, since she knows the property well. As she is going around the property, she sees her other cousin Lola being assaulted by a man. The man is actually Paul, but Briani doesn't know that. She can't really see the man's face in the darkness, and he runs away when she approaches. Lola is shocked and crying a lot. Briani tries to ask the frightened girl if it was Robbie, but she sounds as if she's already sure it is. Confused, Lola agrees with Briani, and now it's time to call the police. Back at the house, Briani tells her mother and siblings that it was Robbie who assaulted Lola, and they call the police. Briani is sure in her statement that Robbie is guilty. She even shows her mother the letter he sent Cecilia earlier, which is crass and used as evidence. That, along with Lola's statement, is enough to send Robbie to prison. Cecilia is desperate as she watches Robbie being taken away. She's certain he isn't guilty, but without further proof, and against Briani's words, there's nothing for her to do. Robbie's life and future are destroyed by the lie Briani told the police, even if her young and confused mind thought she was right in her judgment. Years later, Robbie is a soldier stationed in France. He's very different from the way he was before, more rugged and not so youthful anymore. He had no choice in joining the army. It was either that, or remain in prison. At the same time, Cecilia became a nurse. They met again 6 months before he was sent to France, after Cecilia invited him for tea. It's been 4 years, and they are both different, especially Robbie. We learn that Cecilia has ceased all contact with her family after Robbie's wrongful arrest, and is now living independently as a nurse. Over the years, she sent Robbie letters, but he never answered or even opened them. He's so broken from what happened to him, especially because he knows he didn't do anything. But Cecilia loves him, and she won't give up on him. They rekindle their relationship, this time with the freedom that Cecilia's situation didn't give her back then. They even make plans for the future. In one of Cecilia's letters to Robbie, she tells him that Briani has reached out to her, and that she wants to talk to her. It seems that now that she's an adult, she understands the repercussions of what she did to Robbie. She's also a war nurse, and Cecilia thinks she's doing it for penance. A couple of weeks back before Robbie is sent away to France, Briani discovers her sister's address and sends her a letter. She pleads to meet with Cecilia in person, to ask for forgiveness, and maybe to rekindle their sisterhood. She's struggling to adapt as a nurse because she gets too personal with the patients, which makes her supervisor angry. Her new lifestyle isn't as lavish as it used to be when she lived with her family. The only thing that remains the same from when she was a child is her passion for writing. At night, when everyone is already sleeping, she escapes the dormitories to write in a secret spot. Her new story is about a couple in the fountain, inspired by her sister and Robbie, and a girl who misunderstood something she saw. Briani's objective in becoming a nurse is to atone for her past mistakes. Taking care of people and working at the hospital doesn't feel like it's enough, and that's why she so desperately wants to reach out to Cecilia. The war gets worse, and wounded or dying soldiers are appearing left and right. It's something that Briani never expected to face, and it puts her own life in perspective. After an attack happens, a bunch of soldiers are sent to the hospital she's working at. There, she meets Luc, a Frenchman who knows Briani's family from the time they used to spend in France. Briani is sent to be with him because she knows how to speak French, so she can comfort him a bit in his time of need. His wound is fatal, and Briani stays with him while he passes away. His death shakes something inside her, though. It could have been Robbie in that situation, and if he dies, she won't ever have the opportunity to ask him to forgive her. Later on, as she's watching a movie about soldiers coming back from Dunkirk, there's a part where she sees her cousin, Lola, now engaged to the millionaire that assaulted her. Briani understands that he was the man who had attacked her, and Lola probably lied about it so that he could get out without punishment. Seeing the happiness and success of the man who was supposed to be in Robbie's place pushes Briani to actually go to their wedding. In a moment, when she remembers what she saw that fateful day, she almost stands up to stop the wedding. It would be the right thing to do, to tell everyone the truth about Paul and Lola. Brianni isn't that brave, though, so the moment passes and she just watches as they get married and leave. At the end of the wedding, Lola can barely look her cousin in the eyes. After the wedding, Brianni decides to go after Cecilia, since she's not answering any of her letters. Cecilia is surprised, and not very happy, to see Brianni there. Brianni tells her that she's going to change her testimony, but Cecilia doesn't think it will do any good. In her opinion, Brianni is unreliable, so they would never reopen the case. She also tells her sister that she will never forgive her. Before they can move forward in their discussions, Robbie appears, and he's even less willing to forgive Brianni. He tells her he would choke her or throw her down the stairs, if he could. Then, he asks her to go to her house and tell her parents that it had all been a lie. Brianni agrees, there's just a small problem. Paul and Lola were now married, so she would never change her testimony, not against her own husband. With nothing else to do there, Brianni apologizes one more time and leaves. Weeks later, in France, Robbie is facing the horrors of war with no one but his comrades to talk to. His wish is that after the war, he can go back home to Cecilia to marry her, and have a life without shame. Maybe after Brianni tells everyone the truth, he can go on with his life and erase all that happened to him. Before he left, Cecilia gave him pictures of a house on a beach so that he could see the pictures and remember her. It's the only thing that keeps him straight when under duress. Sometimes, though, it's hard for him to keep his resolve strong, with so many atrocities happening around him. One day, as he's wandering the woods with his comrades to reach their station, he sees a bunch of schoolgirls that had been shot dead. The scene reminds him of a moment when Brianni was a child. They were together at the lake, and she asked if he would save her if she fell in the water. Then, to prove it, she jumps in the water and Robbie scrambles to save her. She almost drowned on purpose, which made Robbie mad at her. Brianni always had a penchant for dramatics, but that was too much for Robbie. It's this moment that shatters their previous friendship, the first moment of many. Robbie desperately wants to return to Cecilia, and his time is almost done, but the war isn't getting any better. Everyone is called to Dunkirk, where they will all be evacuated back to England. Days go by, with no water or proper food, not to mention that the camp he's at is a mess of hopeless and desperate soldiers. Robbie starts hallucinating. He sees his mother in the middle of the camp, and she tells him to relax. Robbie is emotional after he's seeing his mother, but knows she's not really there. He gets sick after that, and one of his friends helps him. The only thing holding him together is his habit of reminiscing about the past, wishing he could have done things differently so that maybe he and Cecilia would have had a different outcome. That's the last scene we see of Robbie. Decades go by, and in the future, Brianni is a successful writer. She has written over 20 novels, and her last one, called Atonement, is about to be released. She's in an interview to talk about the novel. She tells the interviewer that that book is her last novel because she's dying. At the same time, it's also her first book because she has been writing that story ever since she was a nurse in the war. The book is an autobiography, but with many twists and turns. She tells the story of Robbie and Cecilia, and how she ruined their chance of a life together because of something she thought was right at the time. In the book, though, they have a happy ending, living in their dream house on the beach, the same one in Robbie's picture. The reality was different from fiction, though. The part where Brianni visited Cecilia and Robbie never happened. She never had the courage to go visit her sister. She also never told anyone the truth of that night, so she never atoned for it. Robbie and Cecilia also didn't get their happy endings. Robbie died of an infection at Dunkirk, right before he would return to Cecilia. As for her, she died months later in a bombing. Their fate was very sad, and Brianni could never forget that she had a bit of responsibility over it. Now that she's dying, she wishes to give some happiness to Robbie and Cecilia, even if it's just through a book she has written. The last scene shows Cecilia and Robbie happily running on the beach, living the lives they dreamed of, but that could never be.